All right. Thank you all so much for joining us today at DragonCon. This is one of our Q&As for the BritTrack, and I'm very happy to have alongside me Mr. Robert Allsopp, who has been associated with the program since 1987, all the way up to current day. So, Rob, how you doing?
Good, thanks. Hello, BritTrack. Hi.
It's kind of an annual tradition. I mean, okay, let me go back. This is you've been to DragonCon about 5 years? Is that right? 5 or 6?
I think it's something like that. Yeah.
And it's kind of become an annual tradition for you and I to do a Q&A every year. So this is going to be, I would say, no different than any other year, except that it's different in every way.
Yeah.
You are not here in Atlanta. We're not in a ballroom in front of, a bunch of people.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll just do the best we can with the situation that we have.
Absolutely, yeah.
So let's talk, since there's going to be people watching this that have never met you before, let's just start with a basic introduction. Tell us a little bit about you and how you got started in your industry.
I'm someone who's always been interested in making stuff, and as a kid I was a Doctor Who fan, always interested in that show and a few others like Blake 7, that kind of thing. And what I really wanted to do, if I could figure out how to do it, was build costumes and monsters for Doctor Who, really. And somehow, as I kind of went through life and went to art college and all that kind of thing, I've ended up doing that for quite a big part of my career. I do lots of other stuff as well, but part of what I've been doing for over 30 years now is making things with my team for Doctor Who.
I've never thought to ask you this before, but when you were growing up watching Doctor Who, did you do sketches of your own original Doctor Who monsters?
I don't think I did, really. I think I was more trying to make little models of pre-existing Doctor Who monsters, like using an eggshell and a toilet roll and building a little Alpha Centauri and stuff like that, And then a bit later on I was sculpting masks of copies of the Link Sontaran mask and that kind of thing.
Right. Let me go back to your start on Doctor Who. You came into the show in 1987 at the beginning, or at least near the beginning of the Sylvester McCoy era.
Yeah, that's right, yeah.
How did you get involved in the program to start with?
I sort of, I had a friend of mine, Susan Moore, who had also, who was a maker, prop maker, mask maker. And we decided, I'm not sure if she'd worked on Doctor Who before, but she had done a few things professionally for Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. So she had some kind of a professional career in television, and we were both very keen to get into working on Doctor Who, and we had friends who were also involved, like Mark Ayres, who was composing some of the music, Mike Tucker at BBC Visual Effects. So we knew people who were working on the show, and at that point there was nothing to stop you phoning up Television Centre on 7438000, I think the number was in those days, and saying, hello, I'd like to come and visit the costume designer's office, which at that point at TV Centre, there was an office where potentially you could meet all of the costume designers for all of the BBC productions.
Wow.
And we did that. We phoned up and said, we're makers and we'd like to kind of introduce ourselves, show our portfolio to some of the costume designers. So we met up there with, we must have seen Ken True up there, and Ros Ebbett, I think, was designer on Greatest Show in the Galaxy, probably. And that's how we started to get a little in-way into working on the show. And from that point they started to ask us to do stuff rather than us kind of pleading to be allowed to be involved. We did some work on other BBC stuff around the time. They were doing a TV adaptation of The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, and we, between us, managed to get a job of doing the body of some little lizard creatures for that. And the way the BBC worked then, costume did the bodies, makeup did the heads, and there was very little kind of coordination between the two. And so we figured that in order for our little creatures to look good, we then had to approach the makeup department and say, can we make the heads that go with the bodies we're making, which we did. And we did these kind of cute little lizard people, which you might have seen 30 odd years ago. Yeah. So yeah, we just started just very naively just asking for work, and work came, really.
Normally when we do our conversations at Dragon Con, we start at this point. It's 1987 and you've come into the show, and you start working on things like the question mark umbrella handle and all this stuff, and then we sort of go chronologically up through the years, through the Matt Smith stuff and all that kind of stuff. But this time, and we always run out of time, we always have to kind of scramble to get through the end bit, so I want to start at the end this time. So the most recent things that you have done that we have seen, at least on screen, would be Jodie's second season. And the very end of the season, the brand new redesign of the Cybermen. In Timeless Children and the finale. I kind of want to know, first of all, what the process is. This process has probably changed over the years, but what is the process of taking a monster, a concept, from script to screen? Is it a description in the script itself? Is it notes that the scriptwriter or the director has given you, or how much leeway do you have to create?
That really depends on the costume designer, who is ultimately who we are working for when we work on the show most of the time. And so we knew that we had to do new Cybermen. We knew we wouldn't have a lot of time to do it. I had some thoughts of things that I wanted to do, but ultimately that's not my decision. It's the decision of Ray Holman, the costume designer. So Ray works with a sketch artist quite often, and he came up with some concepts. And we did, I think we might have done a little maquette. Actually, I think probably chronologically, what we called the Cyber Zealot, though he had a name, is it Assad or Ashad in the show? The part Cyberman. He came first, I think. So we built him first, and then some of that kind of fed into what we then did for the complete Cyber Warriors, and again for the Time Lord variant Cybermen. But a lot of that direction came from Ray and his sketch artists, and we'd sort of go backwards and forwards, and I'd kind of say, well, there's a few little details I'd like to add to kind of reference the 70s ones, or he's quite flexible, so that if there's something I suggest, quite often we can take that on board, and we'll put a few little visual clues that just link things back to the show's history, really, which is always quite fun to do that.
Talk us through those new Cybermen. To me, I find the helmet particularly to be a really, really lovely throwback, and especially the handles on the helmet. So what were some of the touches that you brought in that were specifically referencing previous models?
Well, I really wanted to bring back the kind of pie dish thing on the side that was kind of first referenced in the Invasion version. And we did tweak it a little bit, but it just restores that look of my favorite kind of period of Cybermen. Really. And there's a few little details on where the handles connect into the head that are referenced from the 80s Earthshock ones that late Richard Gregory had made, and I was quite keen because we just became aware that Richard Gregory had died not long before we started building our version, and I thought it would be nice to just put a little subtle tweak in there to kind of reference his work on the show, really.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, so it's just a few little touches, really. I always like to kind of look back if we're building a recurring creature or whatever. I always like to refer back to the history of the show and drop a few little visual links through in there.
You mentioned the partial Cyberman, which I thought was incredible. I thought he was one of the best elements of the past season. I thought it was a really incredibly creative new use. Every time you bring back Daleks or Cybermen or whatever, it's always sort of a challenge to find a new way to present them or a new story element for them. And I thought that was a really, really great reinvention of them.
Great. Thank you.
Absolutely.
I was quite pleased with how it worked out, and I was quite pleased with the fan reaction to it as well. It did seem to go down very well.
He was terrifying.
And again, we were trying to reference certain elements that had gone before, like the one human hand, going back to their first appearance. And we did have access to all the molds from the more recent ones that have been made by Millennium Effects. So certain elements we could pull out of their pre-existing molds.
Right.
And as ever on a show like that, time and money is scarce. So if you can do something like that and utilize something that already exists, then it's quite often a good idea to do that, really.
Yeah, absolutely. Tell us about some of the other designs that you created for this last season for Series 12.
Gosh, this is where I've completely failed to remember what was in what season, so you might need to give me a few clues. What else was there? The dregs were the other main one, really.
Oh, yeah, that's right. That's right.
Yeah. That was a really nice challenge to do full kind of traditional rubber creature suits with animatronic heads, and I know over the years we'd done loads of stuff for the show, but we'd never really done a kind of full rubber creature suit kind of alien, really. So it was nice to get the chance to do that kind of thing for a change.
Yeah.
And I was really pleased with the way they worked out. I think there's quite a few problems with the story itself. But I was very happy with our side of it, and quite pleased that there's going to be a little 3-inch version coming out with the figurine magazine that we have over here. So,
yeah, Eagle Moss.
Yeah, that's the one.
Yeah. Oh, I'm excited about that. I thought
Looking forward to that.
Yeah, I thought that they looked incredibly striking on screen.
Thanks.
I thought they were gorgeous.
Thank you.
Going back a little bit farther in Series 11, you've got things like the Thagerians.
Yeah.
My personal favorite, the Kerblam robots.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah.
I thought that that story had a very Robots of Death feeling about it. Did you take any inspiration from specifically from the Robots of Death robots in creating Kerblam Man?
Favorite. The Robots of Death robots. I love that kind of Art Deco styling and the very calm, featureless, expressionless faces that they had. And I don't think what we did ended up visually looking particularly like them, but there was certainly a bit of that kind of thought, like, maybe we could do something that's as striking as the Robots of Death. I'm not sure we did, but it was a nice thing to aim for, really.
Well, I think both of the designs have that element where the mask suggests something human, but isn't quite human. And I think that has that off-putting effect of it's like us, but it's not like us at all. So I think in that sense, it was, very successful and very much a throwback to Robots of Death.
Good.
Let's see. But the Thagerians, I thought, were a really, really interesting costume design.
Yeah, well, the heads for those were handled by the guys at Millennium.
Yeah.
But we did them from the neck down.
Yeah.
And that was a really nice one to do. Ray came up with a really striking costume design and found some really interesting fabrics. And what we were able to do with it kind of felt like the design had kind of stepped off the page, really. It worked out to be quite a pleasing, hopefully visually interesting thing, really. So I was quite pleased.
Yeah, it was a really intricate design and really layered.
Yeah,
what was? Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Sorry, go on.
No, you go right ahead. Finish your.
And again, it's another thing that there's a little 3-inch figure of now, so that's always exciting. Yeah.
Do you get any kind of compensation for that? Do you get a copy of that? They send you one?
I have asked, and they usually forget to send me one.
That's terrible.
It's just quite nice that it's been immortalized in 3-inch plastic, really. Yeah.
How many of the creations that you have worked on have ended up as action figures or figurines? And what are some of the ones that you think were captured really well?
I think there's probably about 6. There's the knights that we did, the robot knights. Those were quite a nice little figure. There's the ham bots as well.
Oh, yeah.
There's quite a few nice little ones, but I can't remember all of them. But I think we're up to probably about 6 figurines now of my stuff, our stuff.
It must be really cool, having been a fan as long as you have and as I have, and when I was younger, younger as in a couple of years ago, was collecting action figures. To create something on the show that becomes an action figure or a figurine must be the coolest feeling in the world.
Yeah, it's great. Yeah, I hope one day they'll do the Candyman. That would be quite fun.
I can't believe that Eagle Moss hasn't done Candyman yet.
It would be good. I think it's one of those ones that's probably quite difficult artwork-wise because there's a lot of different colours going on. So
yeah,
it'll be quite an expensive one to produce.
Normally when we're at Dragon Con, we're in a ballroom with an audience and we always take audience questions.
Yeah.
And that's not as easily done in this format, but last night on Facebook, I put out a call for questions. So I have some audience questions.
Great.
And one of them is about the Candyman specifically.
Okay.
So, and this is from Chris Marney. He would like to know if the Candyman were to make a reappearance in, let's say, the next season in Series 13, what material and technology innovations would you incorporate to recreate that costume?
Good question. A lot of it would probably be pretty much the same, really. We'd probably do the head a bit differently, make the join between the head and the mouth of the actor a little bit more successful. I can't think of any specific material. I mean, maybe we do a silicone prosthetic around the mouth. But apart from that, we might try and make it a bit more comfortable for the performer, maybe.
Well, that's always a concern,
Yeah. Maybe there'd be more sculpted elements than some areas that were kind of fabricated in foam that maybe we'd sculpt and mold in a slightly different material these days. But if we were trying to recreate the look of it, then it would probably, maybe 70% of it would be done pretty much the same way as I did it originally.
Okay. And you mentioned something that kind of relates to one of the other questions that I've gotten from Rachel Roper. She's interested in knowing if there's a situation where an actor got to have some input into the final creation, whether it be, like in an element of the design or the creation of material that was used or anything like that, or are they presented with basically the final version?
It very much depends on at what point in the building kind of time frame the casting of the performer happens, and sometimes that can be quite late. For example, there was a character that had a winged helmet and an eye patch that was in the same story as the big green blocky things that Millennium made, which I can't remember the name of. You probably know.
You're talking about the girl who died?
Yes, I
The
think
one with
so.
Macy Williams and the Space Vikings, and
yeah, that's it. And he was a bit Viking-y kind of thing.
Yeah.
And he had a kind of green light up eye patch. And that one was cast very late in the production process. I don't think we even had a fitting. I think we just built it, sent it off. And then I got a phone call the next day saying, the actor doesn't have great eyesight in the one eye that's exposed. Can we have a different eye patch for the other eye to swap it over for tomorrow?
Nice.
And normally we do everything we could to accommodate, but on that occasion I just had to say, actually, no, you can't. So you had to kind of put up with having slightly blurry vision.
Wow. I mean, it worked for Katie Manning, so that guy
exactly.
for one episode.
Exactly. The only other example I can think of is when we did the fitting for the partial Cyberman that we were just talking about. There was a lot of discussion with the actor of exactly what the cut line would be, how much of the face was exposed.
Okay.
And he was very keen on having his nose exposed. And we kind of agreed in the fitting, and then a little bit further on, the high-ups, Chris Chibnall and whoever, were very keen on not having his nose exposed because they felt it was more successful and he would seem more kind of trapped in the helmet if we saw a little bit less of his face. And so on that occasion, the actor's wishes were overridden by the producer.
Another example that I'm thinking of on sort of the opposite side of the spectrum is that of Bohemian Rhapsody, where if you're talking about an actor, having input into a design, everything that you did was based on exactly what the well-documented outfits that Freddie Mercury wore on stage. So there's not really a lot of leeway that you can have on how you represent these things.
No, I mean, you just have to work in the parameters of what visual reference there is, and you will make things maybe a little bit differently to accommodate the different shape of the actor or comfort factors or that kind of thing.
Right.
But on that show, we were pretty much going for, as accurately as possible, reproducing the outfits that Freddie wore. Particularly because the lady who taught me costume cutting had made a lot of those outfits originally, so I wanted to kind of be faithful to her kind of memory in making them as accurately as we could, really.
Yeah, exactly. So I know that you grew up a Queen fan, and I know you enjoyed working on that movie. What is another similar project that you would love to do? Like if it came along, you would love to work on that. The Elton John picture has come out. Is there another one that you would love to get your hands on?
Great to work on a Bowie one if they were to do that.
Yes.
That would be, and I'd love to reproduce the Ashes to Ashes kind of circus costume.
Yeah.
Which again, that's another one that Natasha, who taught me, made originally.
Oh, really? Oh, that's right. I forgot that you'd told me that before. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, I would love to be involved in a project like that. I wasn't a massive Bowie fan growing up, but I looking back now, I can see what a great kind of mark he made on British music at the time, and the visuals were amazing as well. So yeah, if there was anything else that I was given the opportunity to do as a kind of musical creation, it would have to be Bowie, I think. Yeah.
Going back into Doctor Who, since that's why we're here, you know.
Yeah, absolutely.
Before your work on the Jodie seasons, you did things like the superhero costume for Dr. Mysterio, the Capaldi Christmas episode.
Yeah.
Talk about the creation of that a little bit.
That was a strange one because it was split. I think we did about 70% of the work on it, and there was another costume maker who had done some kind of quilted leather panels for it, and we had to kind of tie everything together. So it was a slightly unusual way of doing it, and not necessarily the way I'd want to do it again. But it seemed to work out fine, and we've done a lot of superhero things for TV commercials and pop promos in the past, so we were very familiar with that kind of territory. And we did a nice little digital print for the lycra base of the costume that seemed to work quite well. So yeah, it was quite a fun one to do. I kind of prefer it if we're kind of building the whole of it in-house completely. But we can work in whatever way a designer wants us to, really.
How closely did you get to work with the actor on that one? Since it's very much sort of a much more form-fitting kind of costume than some of the other ones have been.
I think we did a first fitting on a body double because the actor either wasn't available or wasn't cast at that point.
Okay.
And whether we did a second fitting on the actor, I honestly can't remember. But there would have been a second fitting on the actor. But I mean, it seemed to work all right. I think it seemed to fit in pretty well. Yeah, it's not necessarily my favourite thing we've ever done for the show, but it seemed to work. Yeah.
So, okay, what is your favourite thing that you've ever done for the show?
Okay, I really like what we did and really enjoyed doing it. What we made for Howard Burden when he was costume designer on the show, the Time Lord soldiers that we did.
We were going to get to
that. And I really liked reimagining, kind of starting point being the Chancery Guards from Deadly Assassin, and kind of thinking backwards, well, if that's what the kind of formal ceremonial version of the armor is, what would they wear on the battlefield? So you kind of work backwards from that.
Yeah.
And then creating different ranks, like creating the general. And then in the later story, we came up with another rank as well that had a little gold trim on the helmet that the others didn't have. So I kind of really enjoyed that sort of military thing where you're creating a visual language and creating different status groups within that, while still drawing on references back in the 70s, but trying not to look like it's something from the 70s you're dropping into the show now, really.
Yeah. Well, and that was one of the ones that I was going to bring up too, is that the costume work on the Time Lord Guards in the 50th anniversary episode is spectacular.
Thank you. And of course, we did the Time Lords as well.
Yeah. The filigree collars.
Yeah.
It was
which
incredible.
Apparently are now known as the War Council Time Lords, although originally they were just like, these are the new Time Lords. Yeah.
Well, they have to be special because, those collars and all the incredible detail work in them is amazing.
Yeah. I think I love those as much as the soldiers, really. I think everything we did for that 50th anniversary show, I was really pleased with. Yeah.
Every time you come to Dragon Con, you bring something with you. it'll be a Kerblam Man head, or it'll be, one time you shocked me by bringing paperwork of like design sketches or whatever from the 80s.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Stuff that I had no idea even
everything.
existed. But the thing that I'm thinking of is the time that you brought an entire Time Lord guard costume.
Yeah.
Yeah. So people next year, when we are able to have Dragon Con in person, need to come to your Q&A, because you never know what you're going to see.
What I could bring next year. Yeah.
Exactly. It may be a partial Cyberman.
It may be. Yes.
Maybe. Let me get another couple of questions from the audience. One is from Sue Phillips, and she's really interested in knowing what the most difficult prop was that you had to create for the show.
Ooh, difficult. That's a tough question, actually. To be honest, the problem is usually not necessarily the difficulty, but the difficult part really is getting things done in the time more than anything.
Yeah.
So I don't think it would have been anything that was technically difficult. I think probably the most challenging was when we did the Hambots, because I remember coming out of the meeting, we had a little meeting in a cafe in central London with myself, Barbara Kidd, and I think it was a director. And I came out of the meeting thinking, so these are the filming. Oh, so that's not much more than 2 weeks away that they film this. And so that sort of thing was more of the challenge than a sort of technically challenging thing. Really, it's I mean, always on Doctor Who, you're working very tight time constraints, really.
So you had to create, was it 6 Handbot costumes?
Yeah.
As well as Amy's armor.
Yeah.
Well, in
Amy's armor we probably did in a day.
Well, and that's how it should look. She's building this thing for herself out of scrap pieces from other things.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what we did. We just got a load of reject formings and bits and pieces we had around the workshop. Barbara Kidd had found a few little bits of wires and bicycle lamps and things she wanted to put in the mix. And we just threw it together, really. And it's become one of the most iconic things that gets cosplayed so much.
Yeah, exactly. On that, I know that one gets cosplayed a lot. What are some of the other ones that you've done that you've found that fans have really embraced and have done really good cosplay representations of? I remember going to Gallifrey 1 year, and there was a Candyman, and I was blown away by seeing a Candyman.
I've never seen one of those. I've seen quite a few Kerblam robots.
Yeah.
Which is quite gratifying to see. It's always nice to see that people have bothered to kind of spend their time recreating something that we've done. I'm trying to think what else though. I don't think I've seen a Handbot ever, but lots of the Girl Who Waited outfit.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll see some Cybermen or the partial Cyberman.
Maybe.
Had Dragon Con happened in the usual way, maybe we would have seen one there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I would love to.
That'd be quite fun to see.
Oh yeah, without a doubt. Rachel Roper had another question, and she is interested in knowing what's the design that you generally enjoyed the most, as far as, I guess, the creation process, and what was one that you ended up being less pleased with?
Well, probably less pleased with when I did it was the Candyman, because I was very much brought up on the kind of Philip Hinchcliffe era of the 70s, where things were quite dark and gothic and quite Hammer horror inspired, and things like Brain of Morbius and Pyramids of Mars were really my favourites. And then suddenly we got this idea that was much more bright and much more comic strip, almost pantomime in some ways. And I kind of thought, well, robot made of sweets, that's a really odd thing to have to pull off and make interesting and not just look like a joke, really.
Yeah.
So I was very concerned when we did that one that it was kind of detract from the tone of the series, really.
Yeah.
So I was always much more drawn to the darker side of the series. So I was at the time happier with things like Light's costume from Ghost Light, because I just thought the atmosphere of that story was so lovely and much more how I felt a Doctor Who story should be told, really. Having said that, my thoughts over the years, having met people who've talked about it and said, wow, yeah, I saw that when I was a kid and it terrified me. I'm a bit more, I've kind of come to love the Candyman a little bit more over the years, really.
We talked a little bit earlier about if the Candyman made a reappearance, how you would redo him. I'm curious to know, not from your own design, but what classic villain, alien, monster from Doctor Who would you want to see make a reappearance in the new series, and how would you want to maybe redesign them and bring them up to date a little bit?
I'm going to be careful how I answer this in case I give anything away that might be coming in future.
Oh.
Yeah, a lot of them have been done already. Things like the Ice Warriors I would have loved to have had a go at. And of course they've been done in the series already.
Yeah.
Same goes for the Zygons, of course. What have we got left? Be quite nice to do. I'd quite like to do maybe the Mutts, really, as they were quite a successful design already, and it'd be nice to just tweak them a little bit.
That's an interesting choice. I wouldn't have thought of that.
The mutants,
yeah.
Maybe, with current kind of technology, maybe doing some of the little animatronic touches that we did in the Dregs, if we did that in the Mutt heads. Slightly different ways of making the insect bodies. That would be quite a fun one to do, and not one of the necessarily best known creatures, but ones that I thought were quite effective in their time, really.
Well, speaking of insect bodies, I would love to see an update of any of the races from the Web Planet.
Yeah, I was thinking actually the Zarbi would be another one to try and make a little bit more actor friendly.
Yeah, they definitely weren't in the original.
No, exactly. It'd be nice to do something like that. Yeah.
So along those lines, what are some of the classic Doctor Who monsters that you think the design was really successful and still looks great now?
I would say it's got to be stuff that was built by the great John Friedlander, brilliant, talented sculptor, mask maker. So I think there are certain moments that still hold up today, like when you get that reveal of Lynx the Sontaran taking his helmet off and you see the head for the first time. I think that still works incredibly well.
Yeah.
The Davros mask, of course. Kind of coupled with the amazing performance of Michael Wisher and a really good script from Terry Nation, that still holds up. And I still, even though there's areas that are a little bit clunky with, and I think the original Zygons still have a lot going for them as well.
Yeah, agreed. I think you can still watch Terror of the Zygons and completely lose yourself in their look. I think that they still look spectacular. Not even the update for the 50th anniversary. I mean, the 70s version still looks great on screen.
Absolutely. And I don't know why. I mean, what Millennium did for the more recent ones is technically superior to what was done in the 70s. And yet there's still something about the 70s ones that I somehow prefer, really.
But they absolutely look organic.
Yeah.
You know, I think.
And they have that slight translucency. And I think originally they were going to have lights pulsing inside the heads, and then they dropped that idea. But because of that, they tried to keep everything slightly translucent, and I think that all helped the overall look, really.
A more general question, and I don't think that I've ever thought to ask you this before either. This is the second one that's a new one. I'm just wondering, when you are watching television or movies or anything like that, do you watch always with an analytical eye? You know, do you always like see something and you think, oh, that's an interesting design choice, or, you know, what material was that made from? Or, you know, are you able to turn that off and just be a viewer?
I think I subconsciously do kind of think, how have they done that? Who's done it? Is that a real prop, or is that CG, or is it a bit of both, or, you know?
Yeah.
No, I think it's quite hard to turn off when it's your day job that you've been doing kind of every day for 30-something years. It's quite hard to turn that off and just get lost in the atmosphere of something, really, sadly.
What are some upcoming projects that you are allowed to tell us about?
Oh, the trouble with up-and-coming projects, most of them you're not allowed to say anything about.
I figured.
I suppose there is a second season of The Witcher happening for Netflix that we're involved in at the moment.
Yeah.
We very much hope, and I'm sure it will be, another Doctor Who season coming up, probably starting quite soon. Obviously, there's nothing much I can say about that other than it will happen. I think they're just trying to figure out, as with any production at the moment, they're just trying to figure out safe working practices and trying to factor in extra time to allow for all these kind of things that now have to be factored into productions.
Yeah.
Apart from that, there's a new version of Wicked, the musical, happening that will happen in Germany next year, and we're involved in that. And that'll be a totally different design to the Wicked that has been in theatres already. It'll be a completely new take on it.
Wow, that's exciting.
Yeah, so there's things going on. Yeah.
Some of your other recent productions have included things like the new Wurzel Gummidge series.
There's a new one of those happening as well.
I was just going to ask that. I was wondering if there was a second one coming.
There is, yeah.
That's very exciting.
I had a phone call about it yesterday, so that's hot off the press. Not even in the press yet.
So, a scoop right here.
A scoop, yes. You heard it here first.
Yeah, you heard it here first. A week
don't
after.
Tell anyone I said it, though.
Definitely not. All right, so we've just got a couple of minutes left, and I want to talk really, really quickly, since you have such a huge career that's impossible to cover in under an hour. The number of spacesuits and suits of armor that you have done for different productions, Doctor Who included, as well as, you know, The Martian and Elizabeth and all these other things that you have done. You got your start in, I think you got your start in armor making. Isn't that right?
Kind of, yes. But what you were saying just reminded me of something, to just jump slightly to the side of that question.
Yeah.
Raised by Wolves, the new Ridley Scott TV thing.
Yeah.
We did a lot of the armor and costume props for that. So
wow.
Watch out for that. There's a couple of trailers out for it now, and it looks like it's going to be amazing.
Those trailers look spectacular.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm really excited about seeing that, and I'm excited now to know that you worked on it.
Yeah.
Every time I talk to you, you surprise me with some project that you have done that blows me away. You know, that you're involved in so many different things.
And now I've forgotten the question you were actually asking me.
I don't know. It doesn't matter. It's fine. All right. Well, I think we need to get about wrapped up.
Okay.
Thank you so much for taking time out of your day. I really appreciate you spending some time with us and talking about your career.
Always a pleasure to be on the BritTrack.
And we'll be looking forward to Doctor Who Series 13 to see what new things you have created for us.
Yeah, and I'll be looking forward to making them.
All right. Thank you so much. And thank you to the audience for tuning in and for watching this with us.
Thanks for the interesting questions, guys.
Yeah, really. I was impressed by some of the questions that were sent in. You can find the rest of BritTrack programming throughout DragonCon weekend on Facebook, on Twitter, Instagram, and on YouTube. So join our Facebook page and you'll find all the alerts for everything that we have coming up. Thank you so much for joining us. Have a great rest of your DragonCon. And